Today's episode is brought to you by Stream by AlphaSense, an expert interview transcript library that integrates AI-generated call summaries and NLP search technology so their clients can quickly pinpoint the most critical insights. Start your free trial at www.streamrg.co/PMC. That's STREAMRG.co/PMC. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not an offer or solicitation of an offer to buy or sell securities. SNN Network, SNN Inc., and the Planet MicroCap Podcast and the representatives are not licensed brokers, broker-dealers, market makers, investment bankers, investment advisors, analysts, or underwriters. We do not recommend any companies discussed. We may buy and sell securities in any company mentioned and may profit in the event those securities rise in value. We recommend you consult with a professional investment advisor, broker, or legal counsel before purchasing or selling any securities referenced in this podcast. Welcome to the Planet MicroCap Podcast. I'm your host, Robert Kraft. Thank you all so much for the support and for tuning in. I'm excited to announce our upcoming schedule of Planet MicroCap showcases, our investor conferences showcasing the microcap community. We will be hosting the Planet MicroCap Showcase virtual on December 6th through 8th, 2022, and we'll be back in Las Vegas for our in-person event on April 25 to 27, 2023. Attendance for both events are complimentary for investors, so expect to interact with microcap management teams, see insightful keynotes and panels, plus network with your fellow microcap crew. Registration is now open for our virtual events, so to join us, please visit www.planetmicrocapshowcase.com. Now, for this episode of the Planet MicroCap Podcast, I spoke with Aaron Edelheit, author of The Hard Break, The Case for the 24/6 Lifestyle, and CEO of Mindset Capital. While most of the microcap space has had a rough year in 2022, I'd argue that the two sectors that have particularly had it rough are mining and psychedelics, which we actually talked about in episode 239 with Fadi Diab. Probably the sector, however, that has received not only the least amount of love, so to speak, it's being completely forgotten about and not even mentioned at all, and that's cannabis. I've heard Aaron on multiple podcasts talking about the opportunities in cannabis, and rather than doing another Cannabis Investing 101 pod, we wanted to talk about why capital has dried up for the cannabis industry for now, why brokerage houses have made it extremely difficult to buy cannabis stocks, and most importantly, the headwinds that have caused this quote-unquote cannabis winter. Don't worry, cannabis enthusiasts, we do also cover what catalysts could result in a rebound for the cannabis industry. So thank you again for tuning in to episode 240 of the Planet MicroCap Podcast, and please enjoy my conversation with Aaron Edelheit. This episode is brought to you by Stream by AlphaSense. You can find them at streamrg.co/PMC. That's STREAMRG.co/PMC. Stream is an expert interview transcript library that is starting to become an integral part to investors' research process. They have a number of interviews on a wide variety of companies, including TMT, consumers, industrials, real estate, and more. Stream provides over 300 expert interviews per week, and 70% of their experts are found exclusively on Stream. Stream is unlike any other transcript libraries. Stream integrates AI-generated call summaries and NLP search technology so their clients can quickly pinpoint the most critical insights. Stream's community of experts and thought leaders partner with Stream to build their professional brands and expand their industry influence. Right now, there are approximately 8,500 plus call transcripts available. For more information, please visit www.streamrg.co/PMC. That's STREAMRG.co/PMC. Welcome back, everyone, to the Planet MicroCap Podcast. I'm your host, Robert Kraft. You can follow me on Twitter at Bobby K. Kraft. That's BOBBYKKRAFT. And joining me today is Aaron Edelheit. He is the author of The Hard Break, The Case for the 24/6 Lifestyle, as well as CEO of Mindset Capital. You've heard him on a number of podcasts recently. I listened to those as well. And I had to have him on because, you know what, at his core, he's a microcap guy like me, like us. All of us.
That's right.
So, Aaron, with that, man, welcome aboard. How you doing? Welcome aboard.
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you on. So, to start us off, I haven't read the book yet. I actually just ordered it because I listened to the interview that I think it was with Bill and then also with Andrew Walker, where you're talking about the 24/6 lifestyle and basically making the case for that everybody should embrace Shabbat as a fellow member of the tribe. I try and do that as much as possible. So, for those that aren't familiar with the book and your thesis there, I'd love to go through that a little bit because that it hits home for me very much.
Yeah. So the whole idea is that we're not meant to work every single moment. And with technology, we're not supposed to be on call to every single person we've ever met personally or professionally. And it's really bad for us on a number of levels. And like people are grappling like, hey, what happened in the last 10 or 15 years? Why people are angrier, more depressed, more mental issues, etc. And there's a pretty obvious one, which is smartphones and the ubiquity of them. And there's a whole bunch of research that shows how bad how we're conducting ourselves is for our mental health, for our relationships, for our happiness, for our health, for our productivity, for our business success. And so it's something that I've been doing, and I write in the book about how I really out of desperation started embracing the Sabbath, or for Jewish people, Shabbat. And that's that I'm a workaholic, and I've identified that with me, and I have to kind of fight against my own worst instincts. And so what I've been doing for the past, it's got to be like 16 years now, is every Friday night I turn my phone and my computer off, and I don't turn it back on until Saturday night. And what I believe is that it's saved me in multiple ways. It's saved my marriage. It's made me more successful in business. It's made me happier and healthier, have better relationships. And especially in a year like this, where for microcap and small cap, and especially cannabis investors, it's really hard. It's really hard to like turn off and just to remind yourself that you are not your job, and that like I'm Aaron. I'm not CEO of Mindset Capital. I'm not this or that. And it's, in good times, it's helpful to humble yourself to remind you that you're just a person. And in bad times, it's to remind you that you're not this, terrible investor, to remind you of all your mistakes. And so every week I get a vacation and I refresh and renew myself. And then I have ideas and creativity. And the book is all about that. It's the business case, and it shows it from a number of different perspectives and examples, from Jews to Mormons, to Seventh-day Adventists, to atheists who practice the Sabbath in some way, shape, or form, and why it's so important. By the way, I can't imagine going back. So I see people who have their phones on every day, of every waking minute, and it seems like insanity to me.
I haven't gotten that far to just turn off my phone but I think I might give that a shot, because that sounds really nice. I mean, right now, to be honest, with everything going on in microcaps, I think most of us just want to turn off our phones for like at least a few weeks at a time.
Yeah.
That sounds real nice.
Yeah. That's right.
But one follow up on that, I have to ask, on the personal note. I mean, when you do check out, more or less, right, on Friday night to Saturday night, what's your go-to? I mean, we're in California, so is it going to the beach? Is it what?
Yeah, no, like lately,
where do you get your creative inspiration?
Let's see. I love like hiking, but I'm the father of 3 small children. So I like really just enjoy that there's no distraction, and that my kids know that I'm just there. And so whatever they're doing, I'm with them. And I really love that. And so it's really doesn't matter. It could just be just watching one of the cartoon movies with them, or playing baseball. My 2 boys, which is a thrill to me. I've become obsessed with baseball. And so it's just really great not having a phone, buzzing, binging, ringing, etc. And I'm just, playing catch or throwing the ball with my sons, or going to the beach and just being there and not feeling the urgent need that I need to check something.
100%. You know what? I got to give you a lot of credit because, especially with, running a fund and having the newsletter, you were smart to put out a book about this because now people will know, like, okay, I won't bother Aaron on Friday night.
And it's
like they just know, like
thing.
Sunday, Monday. Okay, fine.
Yeah, no, the reality is that like did this when I ran my real estate firm, and we owned 2,500 single family rentals and had over 100 employees. And the reality is not much happens on Saturday. Really, not much happens. And if there is an emergency, you can have other people back you up so that they can take a break on Sunday or other days and go away. And there's ways to do things so that, just in case I get separated, I'm separated from my wife or we go in two different directions, I have a flip phone that only she has the phone number to. So like the argument of like, oh, what happens if there's an emergency? Well, I got a flip phone. Yeah. Let me tell you, I'm not texting from that thing. I'm not receiving emails. And it's like $15 a month, and it's like my bat phone. It's amazing.
It's like from Entourage, you're like Ari Gold. It's like it's the bat phone, baby. Like, what do you want?
Yeah.
I gotta answer when somebody calls me at 11:30 on a Wednesday.
But the thing is that like only my wife has that phone number.
Fair enough. Very cool, man. Well, listen, I can't wait to read the book and learn about it a little bit because it's a simple concept. And it's something that even myself, even though I don't turn off the phone, I try and do. But I highly recommend, like, I hope everybody is, out there doing something just at a minimum for their mental health, to whether it's like Caitlin Cook says, get outside, or just, taking that day off or taking that night off, taking a couple hours. So
I'm convinced it'll make you more successful. It'll make you happier, more successful. I literally get a vacation every week. This is not like broccoli, that you are forced to eat. And it's like, once you start doing it, it's amazing.
100%. Couldn't agree more. And also at least for us, I usually it's usually an awesome meal Friday night. That's for sure.
That's right.
We usually get a little spicy fish, a little, we get the good stuff. But anyways, so on getting back to the investing side, to set the stage a little bit, for those that haven't heard any of your interviews that you've done previously or read the book, give us a little bit about your background, what led to Mindset Capital, and also your focus specifically. I mean, you focus on all microcaps, but lately it's been definitely cannabis. So, give us the full picture and then we'll dive deep.
Yeah. So I've always been interested, and I'm going to date myself. I remember my dad, I was like 9 or 10, I don't remember the exact age, had the newspaper open with the stock tables. And I asked him what it was. And he explained it to me, and I became fascinated. And ever since then, stocks and investments are all that I've been interested in. I had an opportunity 2 years out of college where I could invest one friend's money who had started a business and sold it. I moved above my parents' garage in 1998 and started managing his money. After a couple of years, had 4 or 5 clients, merged them together, started the first fund that I had called the Saber Value Fund, and ran that for like 12 years as a side project in 2008. And what I focused on was small caps. What I love about investing is kind of the detective work and uncovering things that people don't know about, finding opportunities that people aren't paying attention to. That's just what I'm drawn to. And so that led me to small caps, spin-offs, restructurings, turnarounds, things like that. And in 2008, that also led when a friend asked, hey, would you buy a foreclosed home with me? And I never bought a home before 2008. And so I said, sure, I'll partner with you. And then after 4 homes, we bought a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in Charlotte, North Carolina for $75,000, put $10,000 into it, and then rented it for $1,000 a month. And I looked at it, I was like, that's pretty good. And I thought, you can't build a home, and I looked where it was and kind of did my research. You definitely can't build a home for $75,000. And that then drove me to then launch a very small side project where I bought 16 homes in an investment partnership in 2009, in March of 2009. And then I just thought that was just going to be an interesting side project until 2011. I'd grown it to 250. And I looked at my opportunity set and I said, I have a $25 million small cap fund where I'm competing against the best and the brightest on Wall Street. Or I could be on the courthouse steps in Atlanta, Georgia, competing against no one. And so I wound down my small cap fund in 2011 and just went full bore on housing and grew that, from 250 homes to 2,500. And in 2015, we sold the company to a REIT, publicly traded REIT, which then eventually itself got bought out. And then from there, I joined a friend's startup and helped him run it, and it was sold. And then I wrote the book. And when COVID hit, I just saw another opportunity and kind of really missed my first true love, which is researching stocks and investing. And I started Mindset Value Fund as a friends and family vehicle. And then at the end of last year, I started a dedicated cannabis fund. So I now run like two funds. There is some overlap between them, and so what I'm mainly drawn to is what I like to ask myself is, what is my advantage or what is my edge? And that pushes me to the types of investments where there's some kind of barrier or something's hidden or people don't see what's inside the company, or they don't see the transformation happening, or they're restricted, or there's some kind of where I believe I have an edge. And so that's led me in the past to, small caps and micro caps. It's led me to single family homes, when there were no institutions. And today it leads me to cannabis because of the federal illegal status. I think you have 98 or 99% of the investment dollars are restricted or prohibited from investing in this sector that I think has a very bright future.
Absolutely. All right. And thank you for that full background. So now we can dive deep a little bit. Like I said, in those other interviews, you've also, you've done kind of the intro into cannabis, where we're at, that kind of thing, but I've been covering the space and doing interviews with microcap cannabis management teams for like 11 years now. So I've seen the roller coaster.
The roller coaster. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. Not just the roller coaster amongst like dedicated cannabis names, but then also mining companies that became cannabis, that became crypto, and now are kind of psychedelics. We have a good time here at MicroCats. This is what we do, it is what it is. But speaking to right now, you mentioned that, you feel that right now you see, like all your other endeavors, you're looking for that edge. You clearly see that edge with cannabis right now. Let's get a little bit more of a picture. I know I just said I wasn't going to do this, but let's get more of a picture as to why you feel that you have that edge in investing in cannabis. And you dive into this actually a little bit in your recent letter when you talk about how institutions really just can't participate for the most part in these cannabis states. Is that really where you're saying that your edge is because you are on the more retail side? Okay, so let's dive deeper.
So the whole thing is right now there are states that have legalized cannabis, both medicinal and legal, but on a federal basis, it's federally illegal. Cannabis is classified as a Schedule I drug. It makes it under the Controlled Substances Act, which makes it illegal. And so you have this quasi-legal status. And because it's federally illegal, the U.S. cannabis companies that touch the plant have no access to the federal banking system. And almost all institutional investors cannot invest. And U.S. cannabis companies don't trade on any major U.S. exchange. And so what that makes it is that you have these companies that are very illiquid. They trade over the counter or on secondary or tertiary Canadian exchanges. And that makes them very, very illiquid, and also makes their cost of capital like much, much higher than the average firm. And in a time like this, when capital is coming out of the system because of the Federal Reserve, inflation, Ukraine, you name it, this is like a more extreme version of like what's going on to the average small or micro cap. Because when the tide goes out in cannabis, there's even fewer funding sources. And so what I see at this particular moment, what is so fascinating is there's no capital in cannabis, and we can dive into some of the details of that. There's no capital in cannabis, and so because there's no capital, you have opportunities to both invest in existing companies or potentially invest in opportunities where the returns are potentially amazing. And what's fascinating, and I should give this as a qualification, is I thought when I was launching my fund at the end of last year that I was getting amazing timing. Cannabis was down 50% from where I invested, and it's down another 50% from there. And in my analysis, what I got wrong is I thought at the beginning of the year, I was talking to all these other money managers who were doing research. There was a new fund opening up for cannabis. There was the prospect of there are a lot of signs of federal reform that would make it more legal or open the banking system. And what happened instead is the opposite has happened. You've had at least 3 funds or portfolios go out of business or shut down. You've had Vanguard has restricted cannabis. You can't buy if you're a Vanguard customer. You have Charles Schwab calling customers and telling them not to send money to any cannabis. You just have, what's happened is more and more, there's now less capital in cannabis than there was at the beginning of the year, and the barriers are greater. And while you still have signs that there might be federal reform, like the Safe Banking Act and other things, our federal politicians continue to play political football with it, which has driven lots of investors. And so you have capital leaving, no capital entering, and it just makes things brutal. And so when I look back and say, oh my God, like what did I get wrong from the beginning of the year, is I just didn't realize I was wrong on where the capital flows were going to become. And then you add in inflationary pressures, you add a slowdown in consumer, and you have a little more disappointing results just to add salt on the wounds. With capital costs going through the roof, like debt costs, cost of equity, capital, because there's no capital.
I've never seen cannabis. We joked about how we've seen a couple roller coasters. I remember people are probably sick of me saying this because I've said this a couple times, but like back in 2014, when you had the crate, it was just the hottest thing since sliced bread, and then went right back down. I think in 2018 time frame, there was another one. But I've never seen the hate like I've seen now. Like when we talk about how there's literally no capital flowing into, it is literally, they're looking at psychedelics more so than they're looking at cannabis, which is fascinating in its own right.
Yeah, no, and I think that whenever things are near a bottom, or when you have a real brutal bear market in an industry, is what you see, and you see this on Twitter. I think that what Twitter is good at is telling you what people think right now, and what has happened in the near past, and what they think is going to happen in the near future, but not really much on what is going to happen in the longer term.
You know what's interesting? I've interviewed quite a few folks that I respect in the industry. Alan Brockstein, Emily Paxia. Emily and Morgan actually just wrote a great article in our magazine talking about what's going on in cannabis. And I remember thinking back to while we're talking, I was thinking back to an interview I did with Alan when He brought up a really interesting point. This, I think, was back in 2020, maybe it was early 2021, where we were talking about federal legality, where we're at with all that. And he had a theory where he goes, I don't think that there is any pressure to make it federally legal. Why? What do they don't have any, like, what's the incentive for them to make it federally legal right now? Right. And so
and that was a prescient insight.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear your thoughts there. I mean, like, do you feel that, like, what's the incentives for why and why not at this point?
Well, at this point, there's a couple of issues that make it actually very pressing. And that is when you force businesses to deal only in cash, and everyone knows that these businesses are mainly cash, that invites crime. And so you've had a significant rise in crime at cannabis dispensaries and people being murdered, both employees and customers. And the second thing is that if you're on the Democrat side and you're trying to help small business, what's called social equity or minority business owners, if the large companies can't have access to capital, what chance do these smaller companies have? They have zero chance. And at best, they have to take out just ridiculous economics where someone else will take advantage of them, or they're basically set up for failure. And so I think those two things have really changed the calculus in the past year. And that's why I think you're starting to see a shift in tone from people like Senator Booker and Senator Schumer and others saying, oh, well, maybe we do need, a safe banking or, a harbor so that cannabis companies can access the broader investment community.
Absolutely. So, going back to why it's so difficult to raise capital, you talked about this in your recent letter when you were talking about the recent raise that one of your portfolio companies, Glasshouse Brands, did. Why, using that as an example, why is it so difficult right now to raise capital for anything cannabis related?
Well, one, there's no federal bank, investment bank. I changed the name of my fund. I was just naive, to be honest. It used to be called the Mindset Value Cannabis Fund. I changed it to the Mindset Value Wellness Fund because so many investors were being blocked from sending money to my fund from every bank you can imagine.
Wow.
And where compliance departments, I can't tell you how many investment professionals in Wall Street would love to invest but can't because their compliance departments won't let them. I can't tell you the hurdles that have come up. And so, if I'm struggling to get, capital into my fund, other companies are even more so. And then what happened is, as interest rates have gone up, the cannabis use in 2020 and 2021, there was debt capital pouring into the industry, and debt costs went down from they had started at 12, they went to as low as 7.5, 8. They're back at 12 or 13, and that's if you're one of the largest companies.
Yeah.
For everyone else, you're 18, 20 or more percent. I'll just give you some recent examples. There's a private company I led, a kind of restructuring of their debt. They got into trouble, just a little bit of trouble. They had $700,000 they needed to fill. A successful company, $7 million in sales. And the only debt that they could come up with was debt that was charging them 36% in interest. And so we led that. We cut their interest rate in half, and warrants, and it was successful. And I think it's set up for success. This company. There's another one California Lowell Farms, I think they just raised $4 million and had to dilute their company by like 20%, if I did the math right. And so it's just these signs that there's no capital. There's literally there's none. And very little capital because the squeeze is being put on the industry from all of these forces, and no capital's coming in. And so it's contributing with the rise in the debt costs. It's contributing to a lot of pressure on the stocks. And so if you do get something like safe banking, which is like, hey, if you're a bank or investor and you are going to invest or lend money to a cannabis company, you won't have financial penalties, or we won't go after you for jail. Like, that's going to open up the entire financial system. Plus, I believe corporate investors as well to feel free to enter the industry. It would be very, very different, especially all the investment banks suddenly being able to participate, and potentially the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ. But right now, you're just seeing this incredible squeeze on every single company in the cannabis space, and it's driving equity and debt costs like skyward.
I mean, so when you think about, I think back to past times, when I think about what really went wrong during those times, easy explanation, you could always say mismanagement. Sure. Easy, obviously legalities, where everything is with that. Sure. But this time around, I mean, this industry's starting to mature a little bit. Like, we're getting people now, when they say on their resumes they've been a visionary person in the industry, they can say they've almost been in it for 10 plus years. Which, okay, that's actually now true. When people used to say back in the day that they were, in the industry forever, it was like, okay, interesting. But now it's, it's okay. Anyways, it's a bad joke, but my point in getting to this is like, what in your opinion has actually gone wrong at this point with cannabis?
I think a couple of things have gone wrong is, one, there is pricing pressure in a lot of the cannabis companies have pursued limited license states. And that's where they're kind of benefiting from a scarcity in each state. It's kind of like its own country. And you're starting to see some pricing pressure as supply has come online. There's also been regulatory delays in several of these states, like New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and others, where they built up cultivate and supply ahead of what was going to be an open new market. And it's either taken a lot longer, or there've been significant problems or delays. And so it's caused downward pressure. And then you have a problem. I don't think it helps anyone that the largest market in the world is California, and it's been struggling under too much taxation, regulatory problems, and not enough dispensaries, actually, and having vast cannabis dispensaries with a large illicit market. And California is actually addressing that, and they've eliminated their cultivation tax. They're starting to really approve new dispensaries, and they're trying to, change their regulatory process, but it still caused a lot of pain. And then you add some inflationary pressures and recession, and it's with much, much higher financing costs. And it's just created like a really tough bear market right now that cannabis has been in, where no capital's coming in and capital has, trying to go out. And then that adds, that has only contributed to the negative sentiment, in the space. So I think in the short run, we have kind of the perfect environment for a kind of like a perfect storm of all these things hitting at the same time. But from the long-term perspective of the adoption of cannabis, of states going legal, of consumers preferring it over alcohol, the numbers are very, very clear. And this is where my past experience is like very helpful is, you know, I started buying these foreclosed homes 2008, 2009. If you had priced me on what those homes were worth in late 2011, 2012, based on market comps, I might be down 60%. I might be down 70% on some of those homes. But my thesis was you can't have, you know, growing populations and build 400,000 homes without a massive shortage of homes very shortly. And everything we saw the last 5 years in housing is a direct result of underbuilding. And I kind of think the same thing is going on in cannabis, is that you're having mass adoption of cannabis. You're seeing a lot of messiness and pain and a lot of weird regulations. A couple of mental models that I think about it is like, it's almost like, you're almost investing in a third world country, with changing regulations and illicit market. And there's a lot of things, but you're just seeing tremendous growth. And so you see a lot of messiness. I kind of think of it as like spring training. Like the game hasn't even started for cannabis yet. We're not even in the first inning in my view. And so, it's just an interesting time. But I love it. I love when there's a lot of skepticism. I love when you can invest in companies at, 3, 4, and 5 times cash flow, or companies below liquidation value, or invest in companies that are going to pay you a 20% interest plus more, equity upside. And that all of my competitors are restricted from investing. All the smartest and best and brightest are, for a variety of reasons, cannot invest. That sounds like a great environment for me, with a 10 or 20 year tailwind pushing forward of demand.
I was going to say, you seem to be in a unique position where you can afford to wait. You have that, you kind of, listen, you've been very successful in your other businesses. Now the new newsletter, you're by all means doing well. So do you feel that that's part of also of your advantage? And I'm not saying that as like I'm not saying that as a bad thing or anything, but like that,
I hope it's an advantage.
Yeah.
What I purposely built this fund is I'm not trying to actively trade my fund.
Okay.
And I've recruited investors. I'm like, look, we could be down 20, 40% in a month. I don't want any money that you need. And I want you to mentally tell yourself that this is like a minimum of a 5-year investment. And do you understand that this is really illiquid stuff and that it can move against fundamentals? And I feel very lucky with the group of investors that I have. It's something I've learned as a professional money manager is you're really only as good as the investment capital that's behind you. My view is long-term. My view is eventually the investment world will be able to invest, that this will be legal in some way, shape, or form, and that this industry is going to be sliced and diced in a million ways, where you'll have retail-only plays, branded plays, wholesale providers, hybrid models, etc., and that the valuations will be very, very different than where they are now. And that, in between, you could have probably a couple of manias.
Yeah. I just thought it was kind of funny is like, once it is, because it will be legalized, let's all be real. Like we know it's coming. When, who knows? But I was just thinking it'd be kind of fun. Like, how many uplistings are you going to see? Like, as soon as it does become federally legal, like all these OTC companies are probably just chomping at the bit, just like, get me on NASDAQ.
I want you to think about what will happen when you have a company like Green Thumb or Verano that's doing 300 or 400 million of EBITDA, and suddenly they're on the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ.
Yeah.
And then one day being in the Russell 2000, S&P 500. What happens when these companies that are lucky if they trade $1 million or $2 million a day and are some of the leading companies in this industry suddenly have access to the entire U.S. financial system?
Yeah.
I believe it'll be a game of price discovery.
Interesting. By the way, are you a shareholder in Green Thumb or Verano?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
So that actually kind of hits on my next question, because within cannabis, there's a lot of different verticals. You got flower, you have retail, you know, CBD. What do you like? What tends to be your focus? And also, we were even talking offline about, regionally, US versus Canada. So love to hear what you like.
So one, I'm not interested in Canada. Canada by itself is smaller than California, and none of the Canadian companies have shown me that they are any good at growing high quality cannabis. In fact, all they've really been successful at is incinerating billions of dollars. And because it's federally legal in Canada, they were able, and it's almost like a crime, list on US exchanges and pretend that they had access to the entire US market. And so I feel like there's kind of been like a trick or a little winking going on of like, hey, invest in us. But it's just, and there's, as at the end of last year, they were still having failed harvests. And earlier this year, admitting they weren't producing enough high quality cannabis. They're leading companies. So I'm not interested in those companies. I am interested in the US opportunity. And what I'm trying to do is invest in the overall ecosystem and specifically look at, can I invest with good management teams that have a clear strategy and that are trying to take advantage, trying to use advantages with their strategy to grow long-term with this industry. And so I don't know exactly how things are going to play out. I have some ideas, but I want to bet on the ecosystem specifically and who I think has the best, at least in this current version. Because as I said, and this is the thing I want to be clear, I think this is like 10 or 20 years of cannabis. There's an initial trade, which is what happens when these companies list in the US and are in the S&P 500. That's one. But what about the next great brands? What about the different versions of how this is going to play out? The different combinations, tobacco, cannabis companies that may come, or alcohol infused cannabis. I mean, there's going to be a lot of different versions of this. And so, but where we sit today, most companies almost do everything because they're forced to. And so you have a company like a Green Thumb or Verano, which I'm a shareholder in. They grow their cannabis. They distribute the cannabis. They distribute other people's products. They own their own retail stores, and they own and develop and market their own brands. And they have to do it in each different state. And they are what's called a multi-state operator, because every state is like its own country with radically different rules. And so there's that kind of model. And then there's another model, which is like a single state operator. And one of my largest positions is a company called Glasshouse, which just operates in California. And I believe they will be a beneficiary of interstate commerce. So what you need to understand is every state is like its own country. And because of the weird federal illegal status, the states have decided cannabis can't cross state lines. But based on my research, following Vanderbilt Law professor Robert Michos and others, I believe that that's unconstitutional and that only Congress can regulate interstate commerce. That's not the state's job. And in fact, there was just a ruling last week from a federal court of appeals that said cannabis, despite being on the Controlled Substances Act, is an interstate commerce market. And the dormant commerce clause applies. They were talking about Maine licensing, where you couldn't say someone from like California couldn't apply for a Maine license, but the very next step is interstate commerce. So right now, a company like Glasshouse is competing at like, $400, $500 cannabis pricing, where it's not a limited license state. So there's a lot more supply, where you have it in Illinois and New Jersey selling for $3,000 to $4,000 a pound. And so if you have a company that has lowest cost of goods sold and is competing in a much more competitive environment, as building size and scale, it is my thesis that if and when interstate commerce happens, that they're going to be at a wild advantage, and that the market isn't properly pricing that potential in. But that doesn't stop me from also investing in multi-state operators as well. I think you have to have kind of a balanced approach. But overriding in there is that each company kind of has its clear strategy, has good management that has shown that they can operate and excel.
Let's dig into that a little bit more in talking about management, because right now it seems like if you're going to place a bet in cannabis, you're betting on the company, but you are probably 95% betting on the jockey at this point, right? In the life cycle.
It's not just the jockey. I actually think that that's a mistake. I see comments on Twitter where it says, "I'm betting on the jockey. I'm betting on the CEO." Well, let me tell you, you may have the best, most charismatic person in the world, but if you don't have the talent in the cultivation, and you're not paying top dollar for the best cultivators and the best talent on operations, you can be the best CEO in the world. It doesn't matter. And you're seeing certain companies struggle with exactly that. And that the talent, and the problem is these companies have grown, acquired, digested all this stuff. And the other thing that we're finding out this year is they're struggling in various parts of their operations, where maybe they didn't have the right head of retail. Maybe they don't have the right cultivation team. Maybe they're not good at growing. And I'm not going to name names because I don't want to denigrate anyone on this podcast, but there are some firms that are fantastic at retail, terrible at growing. There are other companies that are good at growing, struggling at retail. But you're kind of forced to do everything right now. And it's really interesting to kind of see which companies and how they're trying to think about this. And some companies being like, "Oh gosh, I hope we're acquired." And there's some companies, like, if you don't get safe banking by the end of the year, there's going to be some bigger name cannabis companies that are in serious trouble, or that'll have to raise money at some pretty awful terms.
I mean, there's quite a few that I can think of off the top of my head, especially bigger retailers that, just in the LA area are huge. Won't name names, but on that point, you mentioned something about harvests being, bad, specifically up in Canada, and then also bad cultivators. Why has there been some? So
this is the thing: is everyone says, "Oh, it's weed, right? It grows like a weed. You can grow it anywhere. Super easy. There's oversupply, or whatever. It's super easy to say things like that. But when you talk to people in the industry, people actually grow. Like, look, if you and I wanted to home grow, and we wanted to grow a small, really, 1,000, 5,000 square feet, we could figure it out. We could do it. It would take some time. It would be hard, but we could do it. But the problem is, how do you grow high quality cannabis at scale consistently? I've had some insiders tell me they think it's almost impossible because of how sensitive the plant is, because of the conditions, because of the pests. They're like, you go into some of these cannabis operations and you talk to these companies. Do you know what a spotter is? They have people who go down and are specifically looking for pests and mold on the plant, and it can go like that. Or all of a sudden your crop is like, you're screwed. And there are managers who manage the spotters. What you need to understand is, this is not like, hey, I'm just going to grow something outside. I'm going to do it if you think about how big these operations are, delivering a consistent experience to the customer, you need excellence at scale, and to produce the kind of flower consistently is really hard. And so you need the best people with experience. It's a relatively new industry, is hard to do. And it's not like a lot of people who've been growing for 20 or 30 years suddenly know, hey, I know how to grow at 100,000 square feet because I've been growing out of 5,000. It's a different kind of skill set at scale. This is what I learned with real estate. My thought was like, oh, we're just going to hire people with tons of experience in multifamily. People who went, to the best colleges. In the end, I had 25 and 28-year-olds who were running the company because they understood how to scale. They were problem solvers. They were asking questions. So one of the things I know how somebody has done it at best surface level research or no research is when they say anyone can grow cannabis and it can grow anywhere. And I just immediately know that you don't have experience in the industry and you haven't talked to anyone who's really working at this at scale.
I got to tell you,
and that's why I emphasize it. And so, like, I own a company called Maramed.
Sure.
I think so I think that they are one of the, at least in Massachusetts, I know their Nature's Heritage, even though Massachusetts pricing has come down, they're selling their Nature's Heritage flower at $3,800 a pound when the rest of the market's at $2,000. They're doing something right there, right? They're doing something high quality, that is resonating with consumers, that is allowing them to achieve a much higher price point. And so it's fascinating for me to see those kind of cultivators. And the other thing to know is, to understand about cannabis is, why is cannabis primarily grown indoors? What other agricultural product is primarily grown indoors? You have to ask yourself, why is that? And so that's the interesting thing for me. And that's why it's not necessarily easy right now. Now, when you have interstate commerce, what's going to be super fascinating is when you get interstate commerce and anyone can source high quality cannabis, and you don't have to go, like in Florida right now, if I wanted to open a dispensary, I had a license in Florida, wanted to open a dispensary, I can't buy other people's cannabis. There's no wholesale market. It's forced verticalization. So that means for me to open one dispensary, I have to open my cultivation and then my manufacturing for all edibles and et cetera. And I have to do all that. It's probably like a $20 or $25 million investment to open a dispensary. And so you can imagine that in the future, you might have the best, cultivators. Primarily, my guess would be on the West Coast because the weather's amazing. And so if you can control for the weather, you don't have to have it indoors. It's just cheaper. This is my bet on Glasshouse. And that people can start sourcing consistent supply. You'll have more national kind of brands. You'll have more focused on people who are either focused on consumables, brands, etc. Well, they won't have to make this cultivation investment. It'll be fascinating down the road, but that's not the world we live in right now.
Absolutely. And you know what? I got to be honest. That's been the one question I wish I had been asking, because, even despite covering the space, talking about the cultivators, MSOs, the CBD, the picks and shovels, the real estate plays, all that stuff. The one question that, well, honestly, this hadn't really even come up in a lot of the conversations that I had. Well, I mean, not all management teams want to go on a public CEO interview and say that they had a shit harvest, right?
No, you don't. You don't want to say that, but you can see it in the numbers,
right?
You can see when they start talking about, when you have significant price declines.
Yeah.
Something is wrong, where, especially in the more mature markets, you're getting hit.
Yeah. Hey, I have to also ask you, I mean, you say you kind of invest in the whole ecosystem, but do you also look at, the picks and shovel plays, real estate
I
plays?
have. The problem is I haven't found any that I feel like I have a competitive advantage. And some of them I've just been shocked when I looked under the hood. I've even interviewed some where I'm like, oh my God, there's some crazy unethical stuff. It's still like the Wild West where you have a lot of cowboys running around. The only kind of picks and I have a very small position in this Anibalo Pharmaceuticals, which is developing a drug to bring you down really fast from your high if you have acute cannabinoid intoxication, which is where you just consume too much cannabis, you start throwing up. There's a lot of bad. You're not going to die, but you're going to feel like you're dying. And so I have a small investment in that. I have a private investment in this leading California vaping company. But in terms of like equipment, I do not have any right now. And I'd be really worried about investing in anything equipment related because right now there's no capital. So if there's no capital, and I wrote about as CapEx is just disappearing, and it's going to plunge. It's in the process of plunging to as close to zero as possible. Because if I'm a leading cannabis company and I'm burning cash because I've been trying to grow and build out facilities, and suddenly you turn off my ability to raise capital, guess what I'm doing to CapEx? Guess what I'm doing to every expense I have? I am squeezing that as hard as possible. I think unless you have some kind of safe banking, you are going to see a total collapse in CapEx. And next year you'll have very small amounts. And I know from talking to the company and listening, like Verano just they were talking about 200 to 250 million in CapEx. Now I think they're talking about 150 million. A company like Air Wellness, which I also own, was spending crazy amounts of money on CapEx. They're talking about maybe $25 million next year, maybe. So I think that I would not want to, until I see a change in the markets or safe banking, I would be very worried to invest in a equipment or service provider, et cetera, to the cannabis sector. It's dark days right now.
Absolutely.
Because everybody's retrenching capital-wise.
Yep. I mean, we see it on our end. I mean, a lot of this is confirming.
Hawthorne, Scott's Miracle-Gro, Hawthorne division, announced sales were down 73% year over year. 73. It's a crazy number.
Yeah. And the funny thing, it's not like demand's drying up for cannabis either,
No, but you've had this massive growth, massive investment cycle, CapEx, et cetera, and because of the illiquid nature of capital and how fast capital came out, companies have no choice.
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking about demand on the consumer side, but
but the demand of the consumer side has been relatively stable.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's the most remarkable thing.
Yeah.
And so, but that's the difference. That's why you got to differentiate kind of the two, and also remember what at least I own. I don't know if you own any of these, but I own them. I know what they are. And as much as it pains me, I know they are extremely illiquid microcap and small cap names.
Yeah.
And when the tide goes out, your knees get cut off. And as much as I wanted to tell myself I'm ready for it, it still hurts when it happens. You have companies that trade 100 or 200,000 shares a day in single digit stock prices. If someone wants to sell 1 million shares, they're going to drive that as low, they're going to drive it to nothing.
Mm-hmm. I got to ask you, Aaron, I mean, is there any point in this process, especially since launching the fund, did you feel like, am I too early?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I even wrote a piece where I said, am I wrong or am I early? And is there a difference?
Is there? Yeah.
I mean, it's a great question. In hindsight, I was early.
Mm-hmm.
It's indisputable.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing still 8 years later? I mean, just think, I use 2014 as a benchmark because that's when we really.
That's super early.
You know, like,
I really got hot and I started writing about it really in I think I wrote my first piece in the fall of 2020, but I really got super fascinated in the fall of 2021. Mm-hmm. And now I'm utterly fascinated with it because no one else is really writing about or running numbers. And it's just really there just isn't. I honestly don't believe there's a lot of great research that's written about this stuff or diving into the numbers. I mean, a great example is like Glasshouse. There's not one analyst that covers it. No. There's no earnings model or anyone else. I wrote this whole long report and I was just super interested if other people had run any numbers, and no one's kind of running numbers here. And even the other MSOs, and I'm an investor in some of them, they're kind of like black boxes. I mean, Glasshouse is a little different. It's a relatively simple model, but if you're in like 14 or 15 states and you're doing multiple versions and you're not disclosing, it is really hard to model these. And that's both, that can be bad. Because then when stuff goes wrong, you don't really know where it's coming. You really have to trust management. You really have to understand what part of the business and how things are working. But it's a truly fascinating industry that I believe doesn't have enough eyeballs on it.
It goes through waves. It's the waves of like a lot of eyeballs, and then now.
But even those eyeballs, it's a lot of retail eyeballs.
Yeah,
I don't see a lot of institutional.
No
eyeballs or any kind of Wall Street analysts doing the work.
It's you, Poseidon, and ArcView. Who else?
One of the reasons I'm writing about some of this stuff is no one else is. Like I would want to read it. And one of the things that I'm most fascinated by is like you do the research and you're like, oh, interstate commerce restrictions are unconstitutional. Really only a matter of time before that changes.
Yeah.
Maybe it makes sense to analyze the leading company who has the largest greenhouse in the world in the perfect environment for cannabis. It's growing it at the lowest cost possible. Maybe it'd be interesting to run some numbers on what that looks like. Mm-hmm. Why am I the only person who's done that? It's crazy.
Let's talk further.
Why am I the only person that thinks that is worth funding? It's so wild how capital is restricted from this industry and the smart money is not allowed to invest or run number. And it's like, it's fascinating to me. I've never seen anything like this, really.
Absolutely. Well, by the way, my very first job in investing was an internship where I was covering back in 2010, the summer of 2010, cannabis stocks.
Oh, wow. That's super early.
Really early. You should have, you thought that's, oh my God.
I was busy buying homes.
Yeah. You were in the right space. Cannabis at that time, you didn't want to be there. The names at that time, some of them are still around, but you spent a lot of time here today. We could probably go on for hours and just going through so many different things having to do with cannabis because I find it personal. I mean, like I said, it was my first job. It got me so excited about microcaps in many different ways that I love talking about it as much as possible. But we got to get back to what we got to do. But my final question for you here today, what other than federal legalization and then opening up safe banking, so that all smart money and all these influence connections, what else do you think it'll take for cannabis? Let's say let me rephrase that. Let's say that's 5 years away.
Yeah.
Let's play this mental model. It's 5 years away. What do you think in the interim it'll take for cannabis markets to improve this time around?
That's a really good question. If we don't get safe banking by the end of the year, it's going to look really dark for a lot of cannabis. Not a lot, but for cannabis companies, because there's no capital. And so I think what you'll see is a shift in 2023 to just pure free cash flow. And I think in a weird way, the investment opportunity may be even better if you didn't have SAFE, because then the proliferation of opportunities to earn, there's this kind of missing middle. And one thing I've done is shift a little bit of my investment strategy, where my fund, I now have 25% of my fund in this high yield, moving up the capital structure, where I get paid while I wait. Because what you're highlighting is one of the principal risks is it may take 5 years. And so in a weird way, at the end of the year, you may have a lot of distress, not from the leading companies, but you may have distress, and there may be financing opportunities to participate in that. And then I think we've already had the main washout, but it's always possible things can go lower. And then I think when these companies in Q1, Q2, when CapEx is totally turned off and you see that these are cash machines, I think you'd have a return to the sector, where I think some of these companies could actually start, either buying back stock or, doing other things that would surprise people. So that's one. The second thing is everyone is kind of focused on that. There's, for some reason, pretends there's like two branches of government, Congress and, the president. But there's a third one, the judicial branch. And I believe it's absurd what's going on. And I think the longer that Congress does not move or act, the more you're inviting judges to basically issue and rule on cannabis. And so I think you could see one of my big things that I thought was going to happen this year is you're going to have some kind of surprise ruling on interstate commerce. And we got that last week, basically laying the groundwork. And so I think that there still are, changes afoot in the industry, and then you still have the growth. So it's not just a bet on the sector. Like, I'm expecting Glass House, for example, to go from $16 million in revenue in Q2 to 27 to 30 in Q3 and 40 to 50 in Q4, because they're turning on. So each company has kind of their own catalysts that are important. And there still are states that are moving, like where you should get Connecticut at the end of the year. And, we still don't know what New York looks like, but that's a pretty important state. And then in 2024, you're looking at, in 2023, you could have Pennsylvania as well, but in 2024, Florida and Virginia. And Florida could be the mother lode, because there's really only 5 or 6 companies competing in one of the fastest growing states that has forced vertical integration. And so there still are state level catalysts, company specific catalysts, and then there's opportunities to invest and earn a yield while you wait. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunities in this sector, primarily because there's no capital. So you can step in and help fund some of these, I think, well-deserving companies to continue to grow and be well rewarded for the risk that you're taking. On the other side, if safe banking does happen, I don't think people understand what may happen. I think you'll have a game of price discovery, could be meme stock kind of related, is what happens when the trillions of dollars suddenly are trying to invest in companies that, if they're lucky, trade $1 million of stock a day.
Wow.
So there's two different things kind of going on. And I've tried to predict in the past. I don't really know what's going to happen, but it's going to be really fascinating to watch.
That is for sure. I will be watching right there along with you because if I wasn't already before, after our interview, definitely now. So, Aaron, with that, where can my audience go and find more information about you, follow you for your insights, as well as Mindset Capital? You also have your newsletter. So where can people go?
Yeah. So you can go, it's mindsetvalue.substack.com. And you can also follow me on Twitter. It's at Aaron, AARON value.com.
Awesome.
Or I think it's just at Aaron Value, actually, just on twitter.com.
Gotcha.
Those are the best ways to follow me.
Absolutely. Look, man, if you're going to be invested in cannabis, it's a good thing that we take the Shabbat off. We need it.
Yes, that's right. And as always, do your own due diligence.
Of course.
And just remember, I can be wrong a lot.
Very good, man. Well, it was an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. I look forward to our next chat. And hey, we're both California, so let's meet up. Let's meet halfway, at some point.
That sounds great.
All
well,
right.
Thank you for having me on. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks.
Thank you, Aaron. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not an offer or solicitation of an offer to buy or sell securities. SNN Network, SNN Inc., and the Planet MicroCap Podcast and the representatives are not licensed brokers, broker-dealers, market makers, investment bankers, investment advisors, analysts, or underwriters. We do not recommend any companies discussed. We may buy and sell securities in any company mentioned and may profit in the event those securities rise in value. We recommend you consult with a professional investment advisor, broker, or legal counsel before purchasing or selling any securities referenced in this podcast.